council. We're not waiting for him.
No, I have no problem with that. We are supposed to be, Dean's supposed to call.
Yeah, Dean's on.
Dean's on.
Dean's on. City Council, Ripon, California, February 9th, 2021, closed session. We'll ask for any public comment at this point.
There are no public comments.
With that, we will go into closed session pending Dan's confirmation that we are in closed session. We're gonna call the meeting back into order. I know, I'm sorry. Everybody's excited. So we are now back out of closed session. Mr. Terpster, could you please provide a readout of closed session?
5 PM in closed session to receive an update from their labor negotiator, Mr. Werner, regarding the bargaining units in public safety. And council got an update on a pending claim that was recently filed pertaining to a land use matter. We'll have a further update on that at a later meeting. Other than that, no reportable action.
Thank you. Mr. Stu, should we lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please stay standing for the invocation.
Let's pray together. Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for this evening, for this opportunity to gather and do the business of our community. We pray for all those who are participating in this meeting tonight, and we pray that decisions will be made that are for the good of this community. It's in your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All righty. Lisa, can you do a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Here.
Leo Zuber. Here. Mike Verstuccia,
Present?
Vice Mayor Dean Euchre,
Here,
No.
did you hear me?
Vice Mayor Dean Euchre,
Here. Whoops.
If you're here, have your dog bark twice.
Did you not hear me?
That was good.
Vice Mayor Dean Euchre.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Mayor Daniel DeGraff.
I am here, thank you. At this time, we'll open up public discussion for items that are not on the agenda, if there is any.
There are no public comments.
No public comment. Okay, we'll go on to approval of the meeting minutes.
Second? Both?
And
Correct?
Both meeting
Both
minutes?
correct.
Second.
Second?
Okay, the first and the second, Lisa, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Approve.
Leo Zuber. Yes. Mike Verstuccia.
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
Yes,
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, moving on to approval of the agenda. We have items, I believe, that were pulled. You want to go through those?
Yeah.
Mr. Verstuccia, what you
Mine
have?
is 1.2C, 1.2E, and 1.2I.
And Mr. Zuber? 1.3A. Mr. Wheeler, do you have anything to pull? No. And Mr. Euchre?
no,
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved. Second?
Lisa, roll call, please.
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber.
Yes.
Mike Verstuccia.
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
yes,
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Now we need a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Motion approved.
second,
Yeah, whatever.
First by Mr. Verstuccia, second by Mr. Euchre. Lisa, roll call, please.
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber.
Yes.
Mike Verstuccia.
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
yes,
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, now we will go on to consent calendar item 1.2C.
Okay, that's me. The reason I wanted to pull this is that I saw an awful lot of costs associated with COVID. So the question, and again, I'm not questioning the bill, the question that I do have, because it's a state or county mandated shutdown, et cetera, do we bill the state or the county to reimburse us for the costs we expended based on their shutdown?
We don't.
Okay. Are we tracking it separately? So if in fact there is some reimbursement coming later on, that we can include those costs in there?
We are. Yeah, Lisa has a spreadsheet that tracks everything that we're spending. with
It's kind of an unfunded mandate. Follow and do it, spend all your money, but we're the one forcing you to do it, right? I just want to get that clear. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on 1.2C?
No, that's it.
1.2E?
1.2E. The reason I wanted to, I'm going to recuse myself. I'm chairman of the RTD and I just don't want to put my name on that.
Okay, so we will vote on 1.2E separately then.
Okay.
Would you like to do that one now? Let's do 1.2E. Lisa, can we have a roll call vote? We need a motion to approve first, rather, sorry.
1.2E.
Again? We have first and a second. Lisa, roll call, please.
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
yes,
Daniel DeGraff,
Yes.
and Mike Rasucci abstained.
Okay.
Motion passes 4-0.
1.2I.
Okay, can you get the 1.2i on the screen, please? Because one of the questions I had, I just have some rudimentary notes here. There was an initial cost of $90,000. So they're billing us, well, I shouldn't say they, I just wanted clarification. They're splitting the bill. One's for some dollar amount, the other amount is for like $9,400. It said that our percentage of that is 10%, but the initial contribution was 90. 10% of 90 is 9,000, not 9,400.
I can answer that for you. The
Okay.
initial contribution was $80,000.
What's that?
The initial contribution by SSJID was $80,000, which made up 85% of their portion.
Okay.
So 85% of that makes the entire contribution $94,117.
So the 90,000 was an estimate then, because I read something here, it said their initial cost was $90,000, their initial.
Right. So rather than changing what they what they had already contributed to the account and adding more in to make the numbers match, they, just added the 10 and the 50 or 10 and 5% of the 80,000 to make it correct instead of.
So it's an accurate number. You looked at the numbers and that. Okay, well, it
Yes.
just looked like $400 more than what we should be paying, but they short up the numbers later on. Okay. That answers those for me. Thank you.
Okay, and 1.3A, Mr. Zuber.
I just had a couple of questions because I'm getting a lot of questions now that the thing has been in the newspaper and people know it's happening. And that was the first question. When is it happening? We're awarding the contract tonight. Do we have any idea about when work will start?
I expect it to start sometime in March, give the contractors some time to start doing some minerals and stuff like that. But it's being notified. We're working on a website, we'll send out an Excel, we're working on mailers. It's not something that we're just going to decide and not telling anybody about.
Okay.
And with that, they have 30 days to contract right now after council accepting the bid. So with that, we also have a kickoff meeting. A lot of times they come in with their schedule and go through it. So once we get that, like Elizabeth said, there is going to be a page on the website that's dedicated to the project.
Okay,
So
cool.
all the property owners out there, businesses have somewhere to go with all the most, but we'll put the schedule and everything on that website.
Is the website back up?
Yeah, good question.
After several days of.
Well, it's supposed to be done March 22, according to your,
Well, that was my next question is if it's going to start sometime in, how long, what's the contract for? How long? A year. Okay, that's what I've been telling people. And is there a contingency included in the 4.8 million?
We set aside $500,000 of Measure J money for change orders. So,
Is that in addition to the 4.8?
yes.
Okay. My last question has to do with PG&E. Are they involved?
They are involved. Their poles are being, their utility poles are planning to be relocated. We're in about the schedule for construction of that. They assured me that even with their own crews, that it would be done before June of this year.
Yeah, well, there are 2 or 3 projects in this area that have been tied into PG&E. One of them is still not done. So that, I hope they pull through because it's terrible to have everybody else doing their job and they just walk away for 6 months and nothing can happen. So,
Well, the underground is going to take 4 or 5 months in and of itself before any road improvements begin. And so they'll have that time as well to
Are they involved in the underground or is theirs just the poles?
They're just relocating.
Okay, all right,
Finishing the work they currently have.
okay, thank you. With that, I'll move to approve 1.2, whatever. You have questions?
Well, I just have a question too. Yeah, based on, because you made a very good observation. So the 4.7 doesn't include any contingencies. Did the other bids include contingencies? Why wouldn't they include their own, I mean, they know they're gonna run into some problem.
Right, those are change orders. And they'll-
Yeah.
Well, I know, but that increases the price. I mean, you think they, say realistically, here's kind of what a price is, but okay.
Well, because they base their bid on the plans and what they see. A change
know.
order that comes
I know.
through,
No, I know.
in theory, they have no idea it's coming at this point.
I know.
My question was just the 4.8 million that was listed as the price. I just wanted to know if that included. I understand it's got to be our money. I just didn't know if it was 4.8, but it's really,
Right.
it
well,
could be as much as 5.3.
Yeah. Or more.
How I priced it out in the staff report for the breakdown of what's gonna be charged is the 4.8 and then plus an additional 500,000 of measure.
Gotcha. All right.
Which is going to be for price increases, material, whatever happens to be. Because that, would that be,
Or somebody's digging down there and they find a
well, that's the big
4-ton
problem,
block
yeah.
of concrete,
Well, in this town, it's likely to happen because we don't have necessarily, there's been places where we've dug before where somebody hit something going, didn't know that was there. Well, neither did we.
What happened out there at the Colony House?
Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the change orders came in, they were digging out there and found a chunk of concrete. Nobody knew it was there.
Yeah.
Old
Or wood, water
base,
pipes.
base for a wind machine.
Is that what it was?
Probably a big chunk of concrete.
Okay, so I'll second Leo's motion.
That's for 1.2 C, I, and 1.3 A altogether.
Yes.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Roll call vote, please, Lisa.
Let me turn off. Oh. Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike Verstusia,
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
yes,
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, end of consent calendar. Moving on to resolutions. Resolution of the Ripon City Council adopting the City of Ripon fiscal year 2020-21 amended budget. Mr. Werner.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen right there. You can see my presentation I have. As you recall, when the city council approved the budget back at the start of the current fiscal year, this was a unusual time, and there was a lot of uncertainty as we moved forward through a pandemic. At the time the budget was approved, it had projected a $610,000 deficit. The direction from council was to watch that very closely, bring back regular updates, but also amend that budget halfway through the fiscal year as we get a better idea of what this means and how it impacts the general fund. So tonight's presentation is bringing back that amended budget for the city council's consideration. I sat in a city manager conference. This is all the city managers in California had an opportunity to sit into this conference, but one of the presentations that I thought was very interesting was by the UCLA Business School. And they compared this is GDP, so on a national level, but the 2020 pandemic, the lockdown and recovery, which is shown with the red line on here, and how it compares to the Great Recession. I think even when we were talking very early on about the 2021 budget, the current fiscal year's budget, we had talked and said, there's a lot of discussion about a V-shaped decline in the budget. And that's certainly what we see. There's still some uncertainty. You can see where we're at right now is above the low in the Great Recession. Hopefully we're able to continue a V-shape coming out of this. So, a really severe cut that has happened, and we experienced that cut. Obviously there's been a lot of recovery since then, but hopefully that recovery continues at that more accelerated rate than what we've seen during the Great Recession. The other slide, and this is really just an overall summary of a number of different slides that were presented to the group. But first point they made was the labor market recovery is slower in California than in the US because of the reopening plan and different tiers that the businesses are having to operate under. So they still projected a slow recovery in Q4 of 2020 and first quarter of 2021. That recovery really is tied to vaccinations and how quickly they're able to deploy those vaccinations. And like we talked about with the tiered reopening, what are the policies going forward? At some point, do we get away from those tiers and open up back to somewhat of a normal way of businesses operating? And then obviously employment recovery, they had expected to happen in late 2022. This is an update where we're at as of January 21. This is a graph that I regularly show the city council. It shows the revenue and expenses that we see every month. And it also tracks the general fund balance. And just to talk about the blue lines, and that correlates to the right side of my graph here. The dark blue line that is dashed is actually the amended budget, the $400,000 deficit that I'm currently projecting. It tracks that, what I project that to be over the fiscal year. The light blue line on the top is last fiscal year's general fund balance. And then the solid blue line in the middle is the actual general fund balance for the current fiscal year. So you can see pretty much through the current fiscal year, we have been just about in the middle of those two lines, fairly stable. Sales tax, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the presentation, but there's 5 different revenue line items in our general fund that have been most impacted by COVID. Or been impacted by COVID. The ones that are the most impacted is sales tax and then recreation revenue. But our sales tax, similar to what I do here, like I did on the previous slide, I track sales tax balance over the fiscal year. The green line is from last fiscal year where we ended up about $3.5 million. I'm currently, in what we've been tracking pretty early on in this fiscal year, is this year we're about 20% behind in that. So the sales tax projection right now is about $2.8 million for this fiscal year. One of the things I would also point out in this slide, the way that sales tax works, we get regular monthly payments that are based off a calculation that they have, but they true it up once a quarter. And that really is a sign of the actual sales tax that's being received by the city. Our next true up is in February. So you can see what we got last year was a fairly large payment, and we'll see here in a couple of weeks what the true up is for this fiscal year. One of the things that we talked about, and this was probably a very similar slide I showed early on when we started talking about this current year's budget. The city council has implemented a number of policies to mitigate this type of short-term economic downturn. And these are really based off the lessons learned from the Great Recession and provide ourselves some cushion. When you see these kind of economic downturns, they happen. And the thought was, let's put some policies in place that forces or doesn't force us to have to go out and make cuts. And that was cuts to the services that the city provides to the community, as well as the benefits that we provide to our city employees. And so just to provide some stability was the reason for that. So there's a number of policies on here. I'll quickly go through those. We have a mitigation fund, a general fund mitigation fund that was set up. This is money that we received from development agreements to mitigate the impacts of growth. The interest from that account stays in there until years where there is a deficit that's anticipated in the general fund. When that happens, the city council has the ability to take that interest and transfer it to the general fund operations. And that's what's being recommended with this year. In this slide, I did show $150,000. That was based off the interest that was earned last fiscal year. Lisa and I were looking at it this afternoon. It looks like it is going to be a little bit less than that, maybe even up to $50,000 less than that. If you recall, The LAIF interest was doing, the interest we were earning off of LAIF was doing very well because of some of the federal government tightening, economic tightening that was happening at the time. It was unusual. We said it was unusual, and it's ending. It has ended. So I'm going to take a closer look at that number. But when I update the council next month on the budget, I would expect that to be closer to $100,000. So, but there's a lot of, every time I update these, there's some ups and downs as we go. Prior year surplus. Last year, we ended up with a surplus of $1.4 million. That's certainly an option for the council to use to mitigate the projected deficit that we're facing this fiscal year. COVID CARES Act, we received $200,000 from the government to mitigate COVID. So far, we have transferred about $405,000 from a litigation natural disaster contingency fund that the council has set up for times like this. That the goal in that account is $500,000. I would recommend that the city transfer the CARES Act money that we received back to that account to cover at least half or close to half of the small business grant program that was provided 2 different times now. We have set up different contingency accounts for these type of economic downturns. When we set those up, the basis was to get through a 3-year economic downturn, like I said, to start off with, not to make real cuts to services and employee benefits, but be able to get through it using contingency funds. And then lastly, as a last resort, we have the general fund reserve. And that's really intended to provide a buffer until you to resolve a structural deficit. I don't believe we're there right now. I think we still are talking about an economic downturn. But once you get through all those other policies and how do you mitigate such a downturn, the reserves are really your last option. General fund revenue, this is the update budget compared to last fiscal year. And I do show the 5 different accounts in green that were impacted by COVID. Overall, I'm showing a $1.2 million reduction in general fund revenue compared to last fiscal year. It's about a 10% reduction.
Kevin, can I ask you a question while you're on that page? I think you hit on this because I didn't understand what you said. Your interest income at 235, is that what did you hit on earlier saying that should be less?
Yeah, we were just looking at this afternoon.
Because that was one of my questions. That's awfully high.
Yeah,
I want to put my money where yours is.
Well, and that did include the transfer of the interest from the mitigation fund. So that included what I assumed was $150,000. But Lisa and I are going to take a closer look at that and what we're projecting. We'll talk to Chandler Management to get a better idea of what that number should be.
Thanks. I thought you hit on it earlier, but I didn't quite understand. So thanks.
But that does include that transfer from the mitigation fund.
Hey, Kevin,
Yes.
you said that there was a 10% differential, but it looks a lot larger than that to me. Or am I looking at the wrong number?
I was talking about the bottom line number.
Oh, okay.
Oh, by versus 11.6.
Okay, sorry.
Expenses, you can see that actually from what I budgeted at the beginning of the fiscal year to what is shown in the amended budget, they haven't changed that much. There was an improvement. Like I said, the deficit went from 610,000 to maybe close to 400,000 right now. That was really, revenue seemed to be doing better than what I was initially projecting. There wasn't too much in the way of changes as far as the general fund budget. As far as expenses go, I will say we have reallocated staff. There's staff that has been working in the general fund that, because of COVID restrictions, weren't doing the same jobs. Those have been reorganized to areas of the city that are still operating, and they've been able to help us out in those areas. But that was probably the only change that was made in the expenses. Capital purchases, the initial budget did not show any capital purchases just because of some of the unknowns. As we've talked about many times, we made a lot of progress, especially in the police department side, of replacing vehicles and getting them on a better schedule. The intent is to continue to do that and also do that with Public Works. These last year or two, we've started buying new trucks to replace the old ones. And I'm recommending that we do that again as far as one more truck, one patrol vehicle, and then replacing an existing server.
Kevin, I have a question. I think I asked this before, and I hate to keep asking. There's $1.5 million for all of those categories, not 1.5 million in each of those categories.
That's a good point.
So it
So
looks like we have $4.5 million. We only have 1.5.
only 1.5, and that's a really good point. And the way that we go through this budget process, when I'm talking about the deficit, I'm talking about operational expenses. Normally on years where there's a surplus, the city council will direct how to allocate that operational surplus. And capital funds is one of the places that the council will allocate money. So that's how we ended up with the 1.5 million. You're right, that's a single fund. And then this is the last slide. These are the recommendations with the general fund budget to approve the amended budget that shows close to a $400,000 deficit for the current fiscal year. CARES Act funding to transfer that to the contingency fund that we've set up. Purchase the $132,000 of capital items I just summarized in the previous slide. And then the last one is to add a part-time dispatch position for the current fiscal year. That would have a general fund impact of about $15,000 because it's a partial year.
None of these are included in the expenses that you showed in your little chart?
They
These
are.
are, these are additional.
No, these are.
They're in there already.
They're in there already. Right.
You ready for questions?
I'm ready.
I'm going to give you a scenario, first of all. This is how I'm looking at this. Last year, at the end of the year, we had a $1.4 million surplus. This year, you're projecting that income will be $1.2 million less than last year, right?
Yes.
So assuming nothing changed between last year and this year, we could have a $200,000 surplus. Now, what, let me finish, but I'm just want you to check my math as I go through. What you said though, was that income this year is going to be $400,000 less than last year. But since we have the potential for that $200,000 surplus, really the impact on us is $200,000. Right?
Close. The one part of this expenses did go up about $600,000 from the previous year.
You showed it was only going up 400,000.
Oh, right there, 600.
I know it shows this one right here, it went from 11.4 to 12. But the difference is $400,000.
That's the net. So the $400,000 overall deficit is taking the total revenue.
Okay.
Minus the.
Okay, I'll give you that. So there's a $400,000 problem.
Yes.
But we have $1.4 million sitting out here that we haven't spent yet.
Exactly.
Why can't we use the 400,000 of that to take care of these expenses? Because they're one-time expenses in theory. Some of them are 135,000 there's for one-time expenses. Still leaves us $1 million from last year that we haven't spent and leaves the funds that we're trying to preserve this year intact.
Yes, and I apologize. I didn't make that last slide very clear, but the second line item on this policy, that is the recommendation that we use that $1.4 million to cover that deficit. So you're right. That leaves $1 million.
Okay,
Yes. Yes.
I understand. Thank you.
Good thought. Any further questions?
Yeah.
Do you have all the detail there, or are you just going through the summary? 'Cause I don't want to get into the weeds.
Yeah, I would just, on that last slide, I would amend that, if we could amend that first bullet to add that comment, because that is what should have been in here, that we're using the prior year surplus to fund that deficit.
Clarifies.
Well, but I would use the prior year surplus for that. I would also use it for the $132,000 from the capital fund. leave the capital fund alone in case something comes up later on.
Okay.
Since we've got the money here now.
We could do that.
Yeah, because we may not know what comes up.
That's right.
So prior, the deficit and the capital.
Right. And then I have a question about this dispatcher position. Why are we adding it?
There's a couple different reasons. One is we're anticipating a retirement of one of the dispatchers. So it takes a long time to get someone trained and go through all the training that's required, and then get them to a place where they're able to function on their own. So rather than someone leaving and then go hire someone, the way that Chief Ramani and I had talked about it was putting someone in there earlier. They get the training, and so when a position does retire, that they would be able to take over without a gap, because there's just not enough people in there. And when you get that kind of gap, people working overtime, it becomes difficult to fill.
So then, if I understand what you're saying, then at the point that current dispatcher retires, this person takes that person's place and this position goes away. Because my only concern is, I've been there before, and what starts out as temporary, everybody really likes, so all of a sudden it becomes permanent. So,
We had that discussion too, and you know, I think it's something to look at, and more of it from the financial analysis, because right now there is times when there's a lot of overtime being spent in the dispatch center, and you know, if there is some positives to a part-time position on the fiscal side, on the financial side, it may be worth it.
Well,
But the intent is what you said, but
my-
you're right. Your gut feeling is exactly
yeah,
right. you know.
my condition then would be, at the point it moved into that needs to come back here for a discussion and not just happen.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Hey, Kevin, in your spent spreadsheet, you had the workers' comp comparison this year to next year. Why is it going up 20%?
It's based off experience. So they have an actuary that goes through and projects out those expenses. So, and they also look at the experience that we've had. And then I believe that also includes, if you recall, we had I can't remember the term off the top of my head,
Retro adjustment?
Yeah, that
retroactive adjustment.
thing on the last
Yes.
agenda.
That includes
that
the
I asked
retroactive
about.
adjustment? Okay.
I believe so.
Kevin, I have a question. I didn't mean to get in the weeds, but if we're gonna go line by line. So I got a question on it's actually in the why did the PD department, things went up, but the health insurance costs went down? Because that should kind of be, shouldn't that be directionally, it's in your details that you sent
Oh,
us.
sorry.
When you break it down, you're, 1,000 pages of all the line items. You had, well, I went through it and looked at it. So you have costs increasing like they do every place else in the PD department, but the health insurance costs went down from the previous year. And it seems to me it ought to just be directional where it would go up with everything else.
When I put it in the budget, I do it based off the actual employees. So if you had people that maybe are no longer working here, that were families, and it was replaced by a young officer who's single, that would change
Okay.
that number.
Gotcha. Okay. I can't remember what the difference was. I didn't write it down, but it just looked like it should have been directional and it wasn't. So that answers.
Yeah,
it.
they'll still see the increases, but it's, it's a much lower premium for
The difference between a single employee and a family is it's like
Wow.
double.
substantial.
Yeah.
We haven't had families leave. We've had singles.
You have
Ooh,
Husman.
one or two.
Well, sometimes that's all it takes.
But his has gone over a year, hasn't he?
Yeah, I don't recall
Okay, well, you answered the question. I get it.
but that I would guess. I could take a closer look, but I'm
No,
guessing.
you explained it. You went through all that. That's fine. It just, I thought it was formulated, but you actually do it better than a formula.
Yeah, no, I put it individually, everyone in the budget.
At least they'll check your numbers.
It does.
I'm sure she does. That's
All
all I
right.
had.
Any further questions?
That's all I had.
So do you need a
Motion to adopt the resolution?
I'll move to adopt the resolution that adopts the fiscal year 2020-21 amended annual budget.
And I'll
just to clar-
second the adoption of the adoption.
And just to clarify, that includes using the prior year surplus
Yes.
funds for the capital. items.
Yes.
Okay, we have a roll call vote, Lisa?
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike Restuccia.
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
Yes,
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Right. Resolution B, resolution of city council directing city staff to evaluate potential amendments to the open space and conservation element of the Ripon general plan and corresponding amendments
You
to the
talk
Ripon
louder.
municipal code.
Put your mic.
You can hear me.
It's on.
Yeah, the other
Mis-
seat.
Mr. Werner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this, this item addresses a couple different issues. As you may recall, the city gets requests from different groups, different individuals to look into recreational improvements at parks. We've seen it with the Butterfly Garden and the Ripon Garden Club making that request. We've seen it from Eagle Scouts as they're looking to do projects and do something for the community. So far, we've essentially handled those on a case-by-case basis. So one of the things that we're recommending as part of this item tonight is that staff looks into and works with the Recreation Commission on coming up with a process of how to evaluate those requests, rather than just doing them one-on-one. What is the right process for those to go through? So that's one part of this that's being addressed in this item. The other one is we did have a request to install a disc golf course, it's frisbee golf, I think it may be referred to as well. And the proposal was to put that into the Oak Grove area. And as we begin to talk about that and that option and evaluate it and kind of figuring out where to go, a couple of things that we realized is that actually included a lot of attendance. When we asked them for some details of what does this mean, who's going, how many, it was on the order at sometimes hundreds of people down there. And as we were thinking about the Oak Grove and what that area is, I know a lot of staff have gone down there, and not only with work, but on our own time. And what does that area mean? You know, it's a very unique area in Ripon. It's a riparian habitat. There's wildlife there. Right now, there is walking and biking trails. Ever since I was little, the Honda Hills has been there. And, you know, there's kids down there. I think when I was down there, kids were still with, you know, riding bikes and going through those hills, and probably very similar hills as they were when I was a kid. So I think as we talked about that, at least from a staff standpoint, there probably should be some acknowledgement somewhere, the desire of the city council of what they would like this area to be. If it's to continue to be a riparian habitat, what's being suggested by staff is that the resolution here that's before council tonight does do that. It designates that Oak Grove to be continue as a riparian habitat. If not, you know, we certainly could bring back some options for the city council of different improvements that could maybe happen over time in that area. So that's the second part. And then the last part is really just evaluating our municipal code and making sure that everything goes through the right process. So as requests come in, they need to make sure they go through that process. If they don't, how do you deal with them? What's the penalty if someone just goes out and wants to do something, it's at their neighborhood park, and they don't go through that process? So I think that's something that staff could spend a little time in to noodle that. So a couple different things happening in here before staff went off and started putting the work into this. I just wanted to bring this to the city council for some direction. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So Kevin, I read this, and so the question I have, it looks like we're giving the authority to put something in place for a process. But I didn't see anything in there that today, if somebody goes out and does something, I mean, they're supposed to come in and get approval, and you go through the process, that's what you're gonna write. But what if they do it today? Is there any penalty? Is there anything that says if you dig a ditch over on Mavis Stover Park, you have to clean it back up and you pay a fee? Or if you happen to put concrete someplace in one of our parks? I mean, it doesn't say anything about you just violated something unless there's a different part of the code that does that. Because if they go down and start messing around with the public's parks, there ought to be a stiff penalty for it, and they ought to put it back to the original state.
Yeah, it would be trespass. They'd be trespassing onto property that is not theirs, as well as any damage or destruction to the property itself would be considered vandalism and be treated accordingly. So we we do want to address that issue though, because we don't want people to just sort of weigh it out and say, well, what are the risks of getting caught versus doing what I want to do this weekend? We'd like to avoid that if we can. So part of that discussion is it's a combination of the general plan, affirming those policies, and also having teeth in the municipal code on that. So
Exactly. So if you said trespassing, so if somebody goes to one of our parks and they live in Ripon, that's not trespassing, right?
but if they're going out there for a purpose not related to what the park was created for.
Okay, okay. So you're looking into that. Okay, I didn't see it in there that specific, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, thanks, Tom.
So what this resolution is doing is telling you guys to go through and come up with
Yes.
a proposed plan for how we're gonna deal with things like this. Then it'll come back to us for more discussion and ultimate approval. Okay.
I just want to make sure that's in there. That's all.
Yeah,
This is great. I'm glad you're doing it.
Yep, me too.
I'll make a motion. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, any other questions or comments?
I'll make a motion. We approve the resolution.
Second.
Roll call, Lisa?
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike Verstucha.
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
Yes,
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, discussion items, courtyard funding, Mr. Werner. Again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Share my screen
Jay stand.
again.
His daughter or grand? His daughter or grand?
So we've talked about the city's corporation yard. It's probably been a few months back, maybe even closer to a year back. And since then, well, at that time, the city hired an architect. It was LDA Partners to prepare an overall master plan of the site on Doak Boulevard adjacent to the fueling station for the city's new corporation yard. And what does that look like? What does that facility look like? And then also to move forward on the 30% design. They did pause at the 30% design to evaluate cost and how that phase of the project would get funded. So tonight, Eric Wool with LDA Partners is here. He's going to do a quick review, just remind everyone of what that facility looks like and what the plan is at the new corporation yard and in phase one. Goodwin and Associates has also been assisting the city with the financial analysis of that. And specifically, how are the costs being allocated between future growth and existing customers, existing residents and businesses with funding that corporation yard. And then lastly, the other piece of work that Goodwin has recently done has been a lot of discussions about different AB 1600 fees that are in the negative and how do you address those? And I think one of the things that we've talked about with the council is making sure we're collecting enough money that over time, and it's going to be a long time, but over time that enough money is being collected. So at the end of the day, conceivably when the city hits build out and the last person buys a house in Ripon, that enough money has been collected and there's not a negative balance left in those funds. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Wool. And if you want to go through the slides, I'll move them forward for you.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, okay. Thank you, members of the council, Kevin. We'll briefly talk about the kind of the architectural and the space planning aspect of it, and then we'll kind of turn it back over to Vic and Kevin to talk about the funding aspect. But to kind of refresh everyone's memory on where we kind of talked about before and where we paused, we were originally hired to take a look at the existing maintenance facility. I don't think it goes without saying, I mean, it kind of goes without saying that it's an older facility. It's got some significant issues with regard to just basic operations ability and code related functions. So when we took a look at it, the things that just kind of pop out right away. There's just not enough space for current staff. It's an outdated facility for basic operations and maintenance. Then you get into the building code aspects of it, where things are just don't meet current code and really offer some safety issues with regard to city staff. And so we took a look at some long-term recommendations and started a master planning process for the city's parcel along Doak. And so we looked at holistically, looking down the future for several years, and then also, looked at short-term phase one solution. So if we go to the next slide, what you see here is the overall kind of master plan and kind of keeping with the theme along Doak, having some parking out front for visitors, employees, and some staff. But what we're really kind of focusing on right here is the area that's kind of colored up and within that orangish red kind of dashed line. That's the phase one parcel that we're talking about, the phase one project. And what that really is kind of building upon the city's kind of yard over on the corner in the fueling station, and to create a maintenance facility for public works and to address some of the public work needs. And so the next slide, we'll kind of zoom in on that a little bit. And so what we're looking at here is a new public works facility of about 12,500 square feet, give or take. We have some visitor employee parking of about 40 stalls, and we have a parking and basically staging area for large vehicles as they come in and get maintained. So we're looking at heavy duty, large vehicles, 31 stalls, or light vehicle parking of 17 stalls. When we really looked at this site, we wanted to make sure that what we were doing is expandable. So we're always taking a look at what's going to happen 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road. So we don't want to have to tear things down to build them back up again. And so when we're looking at the building itself, this is the next slide, we're looking at basically efficient organization of spaces, satisfying kind of the city needs and how things are used in a modern maintenance facility and with conjunction with public works, and really what staff needs to do their job efficiently and effectively. So as part of that, we looked at the city's fleet and how that anticipated to grow over time, what the specific needs are with the individual vehicles, both heavy duty, light duty vehicles, because they're maintained in a little bit different ways. And then kind of couple that with the staff needs specifically. So we're looking at, have a facility here of 3 total maintenance bays. 2 of them are heavy duty bays, one's more of a light duty bay. And the difference is on how equipment can get moved around them, operating spaces, and just accommodating for larger vehicles. We have a common muster room, conference room, and an office for staff. We have gendered locker rooms. So we have a gender parity. So we have male lockers and female lockers that are separated out, and a common shower, or not a common shower for male and female, but we have a shower for staff, I should say. And various support spaces throughout the maintenance facilities. So areas for machining, parts, IT, electrical, and things that are very specific to a maintenance facility, lube, compression operations that are very, very noisy, tire accommodation, things like that. Most importantly, if you notice here on this plan, it's designed to allow for expansion. So at the bottom part of the plan on the left-hand side, this is the first floor plan, you'll see a corridor to part of a wall that can be expanded upon. So in the future, if there is a specific need, or if something were to expedite a need, we can easily expand onto the building without having to tear things down. The next slide, please. And so what we're going to show you over the next few slides is that the concept that we kind of came up with for just building an architecture, trying to keep it somewhat unique. And it's an industrial area, so we want to keep kind of that industrial motif, but really kind of have a uniqueness to it that is a civic pride. And so the next slide, please. You can kind of see where we look on the site. This is a 3-dimensional view. One of the things we're always looking at for maintenance facilities and public facilities in general has to do with that ongoing operations and maintenance costs. So we're looking at materials for the building that are extremely durable. That includes CMU, metal siding, sometimes stucco, things that can kind of take a beating and still perform. The other aspect where we're looking at here to save cost, as a Ripon resident, I'm always, cognizant of the bottom line, especially in my own city, is we want to take sure that the building is efficiently constructed. So we're looking at metal building systems for the main maintenance bays. That's the most cost-effective way to do this. And then our last slide, you can kind of see how it would look like from the street. This is more of a rendering kind of going down the dope frontage. With that, I'll pass it back over to Kevin and Vic, and they can talk about some funding.
Before we move on, any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So those overhangs there on the, look like the parking lot above the red truck, is that solar?
Yeah, that's actually existing. That's the existing canopy over the fuel area.
Yeah.
Or I think that's the bus parking, correct?
Yeah, that's the bus parking. It's not solar right now.
I'm only asking because every place I'm going now, every kind of overhang has a solar on it someplace. Right, but that's where people tend to put these solar things. Just asking, maybe
We could
PG&E
do the
will donate.
whole roof of the new corporate building.
Maybe PG&E will donate.
Good luck with that.
We could look into it. We haven't included solar as part of the project, but we
I'm
can
just
take a quick
asking.
look to see if it makes sense.
I just like the comments about staying cost effective and not building the Taj Mahal here. It looks really
Yeah,
good.
but it looks nice though.
Real quick before I turn it over to Vic, as we were doing this, a lot of this depends on growth and, how much of the facility do you build now? We talk about this with the AB 1600s and different funds that we have. And, ones like this where there's really one project, just the corporation yard, these are always challenges because you can't build it all now for a population of 40,000 people and just wait for the money to come in. You have to phase it over time. And so we spent a lot of time talking about the phasing and what makes sense, but that was based off population growth. So one of the things that we did was look back historically is what has the population growth been and where we're projecting it, what we're recommending going forward, and what we used on the different analysis that specifically that Vic had done as part of his work was the 1.5% growth rate. So we try to be as realistic as possible when we were looking at growth. One of the parts of what Eric did is he gave us different cost estimate for the total project, the master plan, but he also broke that down for phase one. And at least today, what we should be looking at is, $7 million. And what part of tonight's discussion is how do you fund that? The 40 million total is being funded through a combination of existing users and future growth in the AB 1600 fund. And Vic's going to talk a little bit about that going forward, but phase one is here now, and how do you fund that project today? So with that, Vic, I'll turn it over to you for these next few slides.
Okay, so one of the first things we do when we're calculating the fee is to allocate the cost between development, and typically that's between existing and future development. We base that on a per capita methodology, and based on the city's current population of approximately 16,000 as compared to the build-out population of 40,000, which this facility is going to serve. We've got a breakdown of about 40% of the cost being allocated to existing development and 60% being allocated to future development. And that comes out to the total numbers there in the table there. Approximately 16.6 million would be allocated to existing development and 25.1 million allocated to future development. And that's that 25.1 million then gets translated into a fee that would be allocated to future development, and that's where we get our proposed fees for the corporation yard. Slide, please.
Well, I got a question on this. Can you go back for a minute? So phase one, existing development's 2.8 million, but future development's 4.2, but that's phase one. So, and then you've got existing development, future phases 13. How does existing development pay for future phases unless we already have the money, because we've already collected, it was already existing development. I'm not following.
Yeah, because essentially the operations at the Corp Yard is going to cease. Everything's going to move over here. So as the city expands, the existing residents are going to have a responsibility to replace those functions. And as we grow, some of the new facilities that we're going to have is like for a solid waste center. So as they build like a solid waste facility, the existing residents would have a share of that because it would be used for everyone.
Okay, why wouldn't existing development pay for all of phase one and the future development pay for future stuff?
Vic, do you want to, you probably could explain that better than I can.
Well, we're allocating it on a per capita basis, so 40% of the total cost, and whatever way you want to, for purposes, I think just to present the numbers, it broke it up between phases 1 and 2, but really overall existing development share is 40% of the facility, which totals to 16.6 million. And the way we're showing it here may be a little confusing, but in essence, their total amount is what really you need to focus on, it as opposed to how much of phase 1 versus the future phase.
This is for illustrative purposes only, kind of.
Correct.
Okay.
Is it safe to say that if not one more person moved into town, not one more building was built, that this building is more than we need?
Yes.
So the design of the building is designed to still be functional in 2040.
Yes, I would, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, the phase 1 would accommodate a population of about 25,000.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's
Not correct.
part of this is being built in anticipation of needing more space to do the job.
That's correct.
So that part you can charge to the future.
Right.
The
Right.
part that we would need right now, if we didn't grow anymore, we got to figure out how to pay with what we've got now.
Correct.
Okay. The fun part.
Yeah.
Okay, so in this table, we can see the proposed fee versus the current fee. For a single family unit, for example, the proposed fee is $3,203. When you compare that to the current fee of $1,604, that's almost 100% increase. That's also the case for multifamily, and the non-residential land uses are also increasing by approximately 90 to 133%. And the reason for that is the current fees were based on an estimate. When we did this analysis back in 2017, and we looked at the current city corporation yard facilities and projected that out into the future. And what we estimated at that time was that the city would need to expand its current facilities by 25,000 square feet at a cost of 13.1 million. But with the master plan, those numbers have changed, and now the estimated facilities are total to 41.7 million, with about 56,000 square feet of building space. So with these updated facilities and costs, the fees are increasing almost 100% for all categories.
So this next slide essentially takes what Vic talked about and breaks that up. The left side of this is the $2.8 million that he had allocated to existing growth. We have collected about $430,000 of the PFFP fee, and that would leave about 2.4, a little less than $2.4 million. That would be the responsibility of existing users. So we do have various accounts. When we say that splitting that cost between these various accounts is what you see in the table below. So it would be split between the general fund, capital fund, parks, water, sewer, garbage, storm drain, and transit. And then what we did, we looked at the vehicle maintenance of each of those different operations and assigned a percent share that you see there, and then I show the balance. So that would be staff's recommendation of how that portion of phase one is funded. That leaves on the right side, the more difficult questions is how do you fund the future user share? And I'm not going to repeat what Leo said, but that's exactly correct. You know, we haven't collected that money yet. It's important to go through it, and Vic just talked about it with our current AB 1600 program. We have to make sure we're collecting the right amount of money, and that's why such a drastic increase in that. But there is $4.2 million that would be the future growth allocation. What's being proposed right now is that we loan the money from the mitigation fund, which has a balance, I believe, of over $7.5 million, and use that towards the construction. That would be paid back with growth. So as we collect the money through the AB 1600 program, that would pay back the mitigation fund over time.
Kevin, can I ask you a question on this?
Yes.
So the garbage enterprise fund, we have a fund balance of 829. We're proposing 600,000. We're leaving 229 left. And your capital plan says that 229 is enough without transferring more money in later on and things like that.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we just went through when we looked at the enterprise fund was increasing that to get more capital money. I mean, obviously there's a truck we need to buy, and then you have this expense as well. So there was some pretty substantial increases in the enterprise fund to go towards the enterprise capital and be transferred to the enterprise capital. So you're exactly right that we need to increase that fund balance.
Okay.
My concern, not necessarily good that I don't, it's gonna throw a monkey wrench in it, but if you look at that chart on the right-hand side, if we loan the full amount for the next 18 years, all the money we collect in PFFP funds doesn't go into this fund, it goes to pay back the loan, which means in 2039, it's paid off. We have 1 year to come up with the other 30 what or whatever. I don't remember what it was. And it means we have no money if something comes up in that 18 years with regard to the rest of this facility. We have no money to do it with.
Yeah.
And if we, even if we pay half of it out of the RDA funds, which I think we should, it still means until 2032, we're collecting no money. You know how I feel about borrowing, that kind of thing, but I just want everybody to understand this financing plan basically doesn't let us do anything about the corporation yard for at least 11 years.
And a couple of things, this is different than how we did it in the past, because I think your point on the other funds is we've driven balances negative.
No, I agree.
So this is, so now, you know, as long as you don't have a.
We hear about that all the time.
But it's
I have it on a tape recorder at home.
But it's a good point, because when you look at the capital, you know, a capital fund could have a very large balance. You may really not be able to spend that money because
Right.
other balances are so negative.
right.
So it's a good reminder of what we've done, but this is different because, you know, we said take money from a fund that right now there's not a clear priority of the council. So it allows us to advance a project that like we talked about is badly needed. Just a couple other things I would offer, I guess, in response is, you know, any maintenance that comes up over time would happen through different funds. So if there's a need to replace something in the corporation yard that we're building, that would not be responsibility of the AB 1600. That would come out of whatever fund it needs to come
No,
out
I
of.
understand that, but I mean, if we follow either one of these plans, if we want to expand the corporation yard, there will be zero money available in the PFFP account for at least 11 years.
And this facility is, we're anticipating 25,000 to accommodate. Even after that, the next phase wouldn't be everything. We would, there was a graph up early on, but it showed it's really just expanding the bays would happen in 2025. And I can't remember what year that gets you after that. But the next phase of this wouldn't be the total $40 million project at that time. It'd be a smaller, another phase of it.
Smaller phase.
Yeah.
I'm missing something, but you probably answered it. So where would the $4.2 million come from?
Mitigation fund.
I have a question. I wasn't here for when these construction contracts may have been produced or talked about. I don't know if they've been looked at thoroughly, but just running the numbers in my head, the total projected building is 55,000 square feet and change for $41 million cost. I don't know what's going into all that, if that's, I mean, I guess in the whole site improvements, everything and what in that site, but that's $736 a square foot. And it just seems so astronomical to me, as I just got a quote yesterday for 25,000 square foot steel building that we're going to be paid $2 million for. So I don't know if we've looked at these costs pretty in depth, in the past, before.
Well, I think if you go back and look at this page, see everything in the gray, that's what the 40 million is paying for. It's not just buildings, it's paving and fencing and landscaping. It's basically
equipment
this
too.
whole area.
It's the projected capital inlay or outlay of equipment.
The $7 million includes all of the different equipment that would also be inside the facility, like
Not just the building.
It's called the jacks and all the systems that they need to have.
And the
in there.
automobiles or the trucks or
Well, not those, but
Not those.
everything it takes to maintain them, what is also included in that $7 million.
Well, plus we're subject to Davis Bacon or some
Right, prevailing
ungodly
wage.
thing. So we got to pay more just because we're government.
And when we did this, I think when we first started this process many years ago, the idea of doing something different at the corporation yard and looking even, what the AB 1600 fee, like Vic mentioned, what was very low. And as we asked Eric to take us around and go look at other facilities, we realized how we've been operating and projecting to operate just isn't in line with the normal and when you go look at other cities. So when we did that, and what Eric based the master plan on is the input from Public Works on what they liked and didn't like. But it is not just the buildings in that, it is all the improvements inside, complete tenant improvements, complete equipment to do whatever is necessary in those.
and that
buildings.
increase of the PFF, those funds, those fees, mitigation fees, are based on the growth that we're projecting is to cover that 41 million. Those are the numbers.
Not the whole 41,
The future growth share.
future
of
growth
that.
share.
The future growth share.
60% of the.
Okay.
Yeah, the 60% of the 41 million.
I suspect there's at least a couple of $1 million just of equipment.
Oh, easy.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, where's the other 30 million?
Well, and I want to make sure this has got to get done.
Yes.
I'm raising a lot of questions to make sure that everybody's eyes are open when they get into it. But
Right.
this has got to get done because what we've got out there now is a joke.
Well, it's dangerous too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how much is on our mitigation fund? Like 7-point-something million?
I think it's 7.8 million, if I remember
Okay.
right.
So we're going to draw it down to 3-something.
Well, no, we don't have to.
You don't have to. The other option is you can look at deferring that if the council wanted to. We talked about this before, RDA bond money, $1.6 million that is available. There's positives and negatives with using that. I think some of the positives is the point that Leo brought up. You get the money back faster, and now you're going to be in a better position to have money in the account for growth in the future. Maybe some of the negatives is future growth is not paying the complete full share of that. So it really is a policy direction by the council, which way they would like to do that. You could either, do the full loan amount from the mitigation fund that's all paid back, or you can offset that loan amount with the bond proceeds from RDA.
Well,
What I meant was if we use the 4.2, it draws it down to 3-something. If we
Yes.
use it all.
Exactly.
but in my opinion, we need to use that RDA money. I've been sitting on this
That I agree with.
council for 8 years, and every time something comes up that we want to do, well, we have RDA money. Well, we have RDA money. Well, Jesus Christ, then use it. You know,
I agree, we should. It's been sitting there 8 years.
it's been sitting there
Yeah,
forever.
Well, we used it for a loan. We loaned it for the missing baseball fields. But
Right.
It got paid back within the last year, or so. So that now it really is available for the council's priority. And if
Well,
this
we're
is-
lending it to ourselves. I mean, it's not,
No, we're spending it. I don't expect to pay it back.
Right.
That- If we do, then we might as well go with option one. But, you know, and the longer we take to get this going, the more expensive it's gonna be. It is not gonna get cheaper to do this project.
right.
Well,
Never-
it basically doubled in the last, 10 years.
Right.
Since I've been sitting on this council.
No, I think you.
How come you haven't got it
unless
done?
I think you guys need,
What
you
have they
need to
been doing the
move
last
on
10
it.
years?
This is a worthwhile project. It's a worthwhile process for funding it.
We've been talking about it a
James
long
and his
time.
guys deserve a better place to work than what they've got now. We need to get this done.
We've been talking about it a long time. We need to pull the plug.
And tonight with the direction from the city council is to move forward with this funding plan. If the council's desires to use the RDA money to offset that, we certainly could put that together and bring that back to the council in a resolution.
I agree with Leo on that, we should.
We'll bring that back in a resolution and then direction to LDA partners to complete the design and go through through the bidding process.
Get it done.
What's our timing on it? Based on all that?
6 months.
2 years.
Are you there?
Say it again?
What is the timing to get to 100% design and be ready to bid?
We're probably looking to submit to the building department in 8 to 10 weeks. And then I would probably anticipate a bid schedule of maybe about, realistically, probably 4 weeks after initial submission to the building department. So let's say for rough numbers, you're probably looking somewhere between, let's just say 12 weeks or so, or 12 to 14 weeks before you're actually submitting or actually going out to bid.
Say
We'll
June.
be out to bid in May or June.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll bring that back. Just a couple more slides. Vic, if you wanted to
Don't ruin it.
update the
No, this
council.
is to try to shut me up for a while.
Well, so look at the big picture. And Vic, I'm going to skip ahead a slide just to get to the bottom line. But,
Okay.
what we asked Vic is just saying, like we're updating the AB 1600 for the courtyard. How are we with the city hall and the fees that are negative? Because we want to make sure that with our actual growth rate and the 1.5% that I talked about earlier, and Vic, I'm sorry, my battery just died.
Gee.
I do. But, we only have a couple slides and maybe I could just talk about them without even bringing them up. And Vic, please add in if I get something wrong. But we asked Vic to look at, let's start with the city hall fee. Over time and with a growth rate of 1.5%, what does that mean as far as a cash balance? When does that get paid off? And like I said at the start of this, we wanted to make sure that balance was not going to be negative when the last house was built in Ripon. So what Vic is estimating is that we would get into a positive cash flow situation in 2047 based off the 1.5% growth rate. And Vic, do you recall what how much growth was left after that point?
I'm sorry, what are you asking?
With the city hall fee, when we get to a positive cash flow basis, how much growth in the general plan is still projected?
That about approximately 2,700 units.
So
That's
you'll-
what it's gonna take to get it paid off?
No, that's what will be after it's paid off in a positive cash flow balance.
Oh,
We
okay.
still have 2,700 units of
Gotcha.
growth left. Right. Yeah. So that one at this time, our recommendation is to keep monitoring it. Like we just talked about, it's a large enough negative balance. We need to keep a close eye on making sure enough money is being collected. He did look at what a 15% one-time increase would be. That got you to it helped you 2 years. So you could increase that fee by 15%, you buy potentially 2 years. Our recommendation was it wasn't enough of a reason to increase that fund. He also looked at the library fund, and he projected a positive cash flow balance in 2032. So again, much ahead of complete development of the general plan. And then lastly, the other fund that's negative is the garbage fund, and they projected that will no longer be in the red in the next 4 or 5 years. So overall, pretty positive on those, but really stressing the need to keep monitoring those, making sure we're collecting enough. Any questions?
I have a question. Moving back to the courtyard portion, is that something, you know, if you guys need to put something, bring it back to us, that will do faster to a special meeting to do? So we're not waiting another month, or is it going to take a month to get to, you know, for the next council meeting for us to approve the contract and move forward with LDA to give them authorization to move forward?
If we put a special meeting in, we certainly could do it. I think right now, just the sequence of meetings and where LDA is at, I think tonight's direction gets them pretty far down the line.
Okay, I just didn't want to have them waiting for an extra 3 weeks.
I agree. I mean, if it gets to the point where some kind of council action is needed, let's get it done, not wait till March.
I agree. I think with tonight's direction, they got a good amount of work ahead of them.
Okay, that's fine. Just want to make sure.
I got my marching orders.
Waiting a month for us. So.
Is there any kind of formal action that's needed, or do you have what you need?
The action tonight was to direct staff to bring back a resolution to improve, for the council to approve the increase in the courtyard PFFP fee. The second item was to direct staff to complete the design and bid the project for construction. And then lastly, we'll bring back a resolution related to the loan.
Tom, does that need to, I mean, have we given them direction, or do we need to do that in terms of a motion and all that stuff?
You know, just for tracking purposes, a motion might be appropriate.
Okay, I'll make a motion to do the 3 things that Kevin just said.
Second.
Second, we get a roll call on that, please.
Councilmember Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike Verstuccia,
Yes.
Euchre,
Yes.
Neil deGraff.
That's a yes from me as well.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, with that, we will go into reports. Lieutenant.
I would like to report out, we do have an area of possibility tomorrow, so we can use the area 1. And that's going to be a virtual meeting. And that's going to be at 7 p.m. You can go on our Facebook page, do that, and ask questions.
Thank you. James.
Yeah, the only thing I want to report is the recycling center. Last week was the first full week where we opened it up and expanded our hours. But just to remind the public, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. It's open for residents, as well as Saturday 8 to 12. And then Tuesdays 10 to 12 is for residents.
May I do that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. That's important, because we were out there the other day, and a lot of people didn't know we were open, because it's just, they didn't read Nixon.
Yeah, we're hoping with word of mouth. We got it on the website.
Now that the website's up. Now that the website's back up.
Well, word must be getting out, because I was down there yesterday at 3, and there were already 3 cars lined up waiting to go in. So
I went there at 4:30 and it drove right on. So now I know the time to go. Because I used to line up at 3:30 and I got to go around the block a few times because I couldn't stop in the middle.
yeah, 4:30 to 5 is the best time to go.
Yep. Thank you, James.
Thanks for doing that. And Leo.
Lots of credit goes to Leo, yes. Kai, anything exciting for us?
We will be here enough based on our tier schedule to start offering some.
Can't even hear 'em.
Creation antennas, government purple, and then move into that.
All right.
Cool.
Looking
What's been
forward.
going on in Federal Road?
Ken, anything?
Couple quick items, so next Tuesday evening will be our final meeting, Monday is holiday. There's a couple items on there. One will be accessory dwelling unit ordinance. The state in the last few years has been mandating certain requirements for accessory dwelling units. We'll be bringing that to the planning commission. They'll be making a recommendation to the city council. In front of city council at the March meeting. If you want to kind of get a head start on some of that, we just send out a link to the planning commission agenda to look at some of the changes. If you got questions, feel free to email me or call me. And the second item on there is a fast food restaurant built on one parcel over there, out in front of Lunch Squad on Jackson Road. We're looking to build a Burger King and a Popeye's Chicken. Two individual buildings on one site there. That'll be going for the planning commission next Tuesday.
Nice.
So the board, come down.
Can't come down, you just,
You mean turn on the iPad?
There we go. Right, Elizabeth.
I put on your, that, the status of the food project.
Anybody almost got in an accident at Colony and Hoff yet? Yeah, imagine so. It's a little bit.
well, I know of one person, namely me, that stopped on the green because I was so used to stopping there, I just pulled up and stopped.
It's hard not to do that after many years of driving through that thing, so
It's nice once you get used to it.
It is, it is.
Big time.
you gotta remind yourself. It's pretty funny.
You're out there, you're a reminder.
Friendly reminders. Good.
Red means red, green means go.
Yep. Dom, anything?
No report.
Nothing. Kevin,
Nothing to report.
Mr. Wheeler,
Nothing to report.
Zuber.
I have a question for James. I've noticed that there are people around who are still stacking stuff in the street. You know, prunings and stuff.
It's road pickup is over.
Yeah, I know. So do you tell them, sorry, clean it up?
We do.
Okay.
We tag those. We have a service available, residents are available, $40 basically.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Euchre.
Nothing to report.
Well, you guys got nothing. Well, as per usual, I will thank, look at all the audience members, members of the public who were listening. Dan, do you have an account of how many people are on?
It's like 60.
All right.
Those are all my family.
All 6 screens and their families. Appreciate you being there listening. Anybody else who follows up through the YouTube link, appreciate it. With that, we will adjourn the meeting.
We got one.
Successor agents.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, Lisa, roll call.
Director Tim Wheeler,
Here.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike
Here.
Verstucha,
Present.
Vice Chairman Dean Euchre,
Here.
Chairman Daniel DeGraff.
I am here. All right, public discussion. Any items from the public?
No comments from the public.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second.
We have a roll call vote.
Director Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike Verstucha,
Yes.
Dean Euchre,
I hear.
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Consent calendar. Can we take both of these at once? Do we need to talk to them?
Yes, it's a consent
Yes,
calendar.
kids consent.
Consent calendar, yeah. Okay. then
I looked at it. I'll move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
we have first and second. Can we get a roll call vote, please, Lisa?
Director Tim Wheeler,
Yes.
Leo Zuber,
Yes.
Mike Verstucha,
Yes.
Euchre,
Yes.
Daniel DeGraff.
Yes.
Motion passes
Meeting
5-0.
adjourned.
God, that was good.